southern Mesopotamia, 3500 BC. A temple administrator in the city of Uruk is holding a small clay tablet and a reed stylus. He is not writing poetry. He is not recording history. He is not communicating with the gods. He is doing something far more mundane and far more consequential. He is recording how many jars of barley have been received at the temple storehouse and how many have been distributed to the workers who built the city's walls. The marks he presses into the wet clay are not yet the flowing script that later generations will call cuneiform. They are pictograms, simplified images of objects combined with numerical notations that represent the first systematic attempt in human history to record information outside the human mind. The tablet he is making will be baked, stored, and survive for 5,000 years. The bureaucrat does not know he is inventing writing. He is solving an accounting problem. This is how one of the most consequential technologies in human history begins, not in inspiration or divine revelation, but in the administrative necessity of a temple economy that has grown too complex to manage from memory. The civilization that produces this moment, Sumer, the world's first urban civilization, the first state, the first empire, the first law code, the first literature, the first school system, and the first professional army, is also a civilization so thoroughly erased by subsequent history that its name was unknown to the modern world until archaeologists began excavating its cities in the 19th century. The people who invented everything did not make it into the history books. They made the history books possible, and then disappeared. The southern plain of Mesopotamia, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in what is now southern Iraq, is not an obvious location for the world's first civilization. It has no stone, it has no timber, it has no metal. The soil is fertile where the rivers flood, but the floods are unpredictable, and the irrigation required to extend agriculture beyond the natural flood zone requires organized collective labor on a scale that no previous human society has attempted. The organizational challenge is the key. The Sumerian cities that emerged between 4000 and 3000 BC are built around temples, massive mud brick structures that serve simultaneously as religious centers, administrative headquarters, storage facilities, and redistributive economic engines. The temple receives agricultural surplus from the surrounding farmland, processes it through specialized workshops, textile production, brewing, metalworking, and redistributes it as rations to the workers, priests, and administrators who service the city. This temple economy requires coordination across thousands of people and thousands of transactions. It requires keeping track of inputs and outputs, debts and credits, labor obligations and ration entitlements in quantities and with precision that human memory alone cannot reliably maintain. Writing is the solution to this coordination problem. The first written texts are not literature. They are receipts, inventory records, ration lists, and labor accounts. The administrative paperwork of the world's first complex economy. The scale of what the Sumerians build on this foundation is staggering. Uruk, the world's first true city, reaches a population of approximately 50,000 by 3000 BC, surrounded by dependent settlements, housing perhaps another 50,000 people in the surrounding territory. No human settlement of comparable size has ever existed before it. The city has monumental temples, the White Temple and the Red Temple, whose mud brick platforms rise above the flat plain and are visible for miles. It has specialized craft workshops producing pottery, textiles, and metal goods for trade. It has a harbor on the Euphrates handling river traffic from across the region. It has a governing elite whose administrative reach extends into distant territories through a network of Uruk period colonies, trading posts, and administrative outposts that carry Sumerian material culture as far as the Taurus Mountains of modern Turkey and the Iranian Plateau. What Sumer creates in this period is not simply a city. It is a template, the organizational model of the urban state, the first proof that human societies can function at a scale and complexity previously unimagined. Every subsequent civilization in the ancient world, Egypt, Akkad, Babylon, Assyria, Persia builds on foundations that Sumer laid. The writing system that begins as a counting notation develops over 5 centuries into the most expressive and versatile script in the ancient Near East. By 2600 BC, Sumerian cuneiform, named for the wedge-shaped marks the stylus produces in clay, can record not just quantities of barley, but the full complexity of human thought and experience. The first literature in human history is Sumerian. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the story of the king of Uruk who seeks immortality, loses his closest friend, and returns home having learned that the gods keep death for themselves and give life to humanity, is the first great narrative in any human language. It predates Homer by 1500 years. It contains a flood story that predates the biblical account of Noah by 1,000 years and is almost certainly its source. It asks questions about mortality, friendship, the relationship between civilization and wilderness, and the limits of human ambition that remain unanswered 5,000 years later. The Sumerians also produced the first law codes, formal written systems of legal rules governing contracts, property, inheritance, and commercial transactions. The Code of Ur-Nammu, written around 2100 BC, predates the more famous Code of Hammurabi by 3 centuries and establishes the principle that law is a public, written, and universal standard, rather than the arbitrary decision of whoever holds power in a given moment. This principle, that law exists independently of the ruler and applies to everyone, is one of the foundational ideas of every legal system that has followed. The first schools are Sumerian. The Aduba, the tablet house, is an institution for training scribes, teaching the writing system and the mathematical knowledge required for administration and commerce. The curriculum survives in the exercise tablets students produced: multiplication tables, lists of Sumerian words and their meanings, copies of literary texts, and the mathematical problems that administrative life requires. The school is a formal institution, separate from the household and the temple, dedicated to the transmission of specialized knowledge. This is a Sumerian invention. The mathematics that the schools teach are sophisticated beyond what the civilization's age suggests. The Sumerians develop a sexagesimal number system, base 60, that is the origin of the 60-minute hour, the 60-second minute, and the 360-degree circle that modern civilization still uses 5,000 years later. They develop methods for calculating areas of irregular fields, volumes of granaries, and the interest on commercial loans, a mathematical practice that implies the existence of a commercial credit economy sophisticated enough to require formal calculation of compound interest. Sumer's economic achievement is as extraordinary as its cultural one, and the two are inseparable, because the cultural innovations exist to service the economic system that generates the surplus to fund them. The Sumerian city-states operate sophisticated mixed economies in which temple institutions, palace administrations, and private merchants coexist and interact in ways that modern economic historians still debate. The temple economy is redistributive. It collects agricultural surplus and distributes it as rations and payments. The palace economy is extractive. It taxes agricultural and commercial production and uses the revenues for military and monumental construction. The private sector, and there is a genuine private sector, documented in thousands of commercial tablets, operates through contracts, credit, and long-distance trade that extends across the entire ancient Near East. The merchant class, the Tamkaru, are professional traders who operate with capital advanced by the temple or palace and share profits with their institutional backers. They travel trade routes connecting Sumer to the Persian Gulf, to the Indus Valley, to the lapis lazuli sources of Afghanistan, to the copper deposits of Oman. The goods they bring back, metals, timber, luxury stones, spices, are the raw materials that Sumer's cities lack, and without which the specialized crafts that generate economic surplus cannot function. The commercial tablets document transactions of extraordinary sophistication. Loans are made at specified interest rates, typically 20% per year for silver and 33% for grain. Contracts specify delivery terms, penalties for default, and dispute resolution procedures. Partnership agreements between merchants divide profits and losses according to specified ratios. The legal and commercial infrastructure of modern capitalism, interest-bearing loans, limited liability partnerships, written contracts enforceable in court, exists in embryonic form in the clay tablets of Sumerian merchants 5,000 years ago. The silver that circulates in Sumerian commercial transactions is not coined. Coins are a much later invention. It is weighed silver, exchanged in standardized quantities against commodities and services. The shekel, the unit of weight, is the ancestor of monetary units that survive in modern currency names. The commercial system it enables is the world's first monetary economy, and it operates with a sophistication that the archaeological record makes unmistakable. Sumer is not a unified empire. It is a collection of independent city-states: Uruk, Ur, Eridu, Nippur, Lagash, Umma, Kish, each centered on its own temple, each governed by its own king or council, each controlling the agricultural territory surrounding it and competing with its neighbors for land, water rights, and commercial advantage. The competition is frequently violent. The wars between Lagash and Umma, documented in detail in the surviving inscriptions, last for generations, fought over a disputed border strip of agricultural land whose control determines which city's irrigation system can access the water channels feeding it. These are not wars of ideology or religion. They are wars over the hydraulic infrastructure that makes Sumerian agriculture possible. The canals, the dikes, the water allocation rights without which the cities cannot feed themselves. The military technology that these wars develop is as innovative as the administrative technology of the temple economy. The standard of a decorated wooden box discovered in the royal cemetery at dated to approximately 2500 BC, depicts the first known representation of a military formation in human history. Soldiers in helmets and cloaks, carrying spears, advancing in organized ranks behind a wheeled vehicle that is the ancestor of the war chariot. The phalanx, the formation of infantry fighting in close order ranks with coordinated weapons, is a Sumerian invention, copied by every subsequent military tradition in the ancient world. The royal cemetery at itself is a window into Sumerian civilization at its most extraordinary and most disturbing. The Great Death Pits, burial chambers in which the king or queen is interred, surrounded by dozens of retainers who appear to have died with them, possibly through ritual suicide or execution, represent a vision of royal power and the afterlife that is as alien to modern sensibility as anything in the ancient world. The gold, silver, and lapis lazuli objects recovered from the tombs are among the finest metalwork ever produced in any civilization, demonstrating a craft tradition of extraordinary sophistication in a city whose artisans worked without the raw materials they were transforming. 2334 BC, the city of Kish. A man named Sargon, born, according to legend, to a priestess who placed him in a basket and set him adrift on the Euphrates, has risen from the position of cupbearer to the king of Kish, to the command of an army that is about to do something no one has done before. He is going to conquer all of Sumer. The military campaign that Sargon conducts between approximately 2334 and 2284 BC unites the Sumerian city-states under a single authority for the first time. He defeats the kings of Uruk, Ur, Lagash, and Umma in succession. He extends his conquest northward into Akkad, the region from which his own people come, whose Semitic language is related to but distinct from Sumerian, and eventually campaigns as far as the Mediterranean coast and the Taurus Mountains. The empire Sargon creates, the Akkadian Empire, is the world's first true empire. A multi-ethnic state governed by a central administration, maintaining control over distant territories through appointed governors, a professional army, and a system of tribute extraction that channels resources from the periphery to the imperial center. Its administrative language is Akkadian, but it operates through the Sumerian writing system, the Sumerian legal tradition, and the Sumerian commercial infrastructure that 2,000 years of urban civilization have produced. The Sumerians are not erased by Sargon. They are absorbed. Sumerian culture permeates the Akkadian Empire, its religious traditions, its literary forms, its administrative practices, its commercial law. The Sumerian language itself becomes a prestige language of scholarship and religion, maintained by scribes long after it has ceased to be spoken as a living tongue, in the same way that Latin persists in medieval European scholarship after the collapse of Rome. But the political independence of the Sumerian city-states is gone. The world that produced writing, the wheel, the first law codes, the first literature, the first schools, and the first monetary economy has been incorporated into an imperial structure that will eventually be succeeded by Babylon, by Assyria, by Persia, by Alexander, each dynasty building on the Sumerian foundation while progressively burying it under layers of subsequent history. The Akkadian Empire collapses around 2154 BC. The cause is debated among historians and archaeologists. Military pressure from the Gutian people of the Zagros Mountains plays a role. Internal political instability contributes. But the most compelling explanation emerging from modern research is the one that echoes through this channel's recurring thesis: climate. A volcanic eruption, possibly Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines, or a comparable event, around 2200 BC injects sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere, reflecting solar radiation and cooling the northern hemisphere. The cooling shifts the rainfall patterns across the Middle East. The monsoon rains that reach Mesopotamia from the Indian Ocean weaken. The agricultural productivity of the region drops. The empire that depends on taxing that productivity cannot maintain its armies, its administration, or its control over distant territories. The evidence is preserved in the sediment cores of the Persian Gulf and in the archaeological record of abandonment that marks hundreds of sites across northern Mesopotamia simultaneously around 2200 BC. Cities are emptied. Agricultural fields are abandoned. The population retreats southward to the riverbanks, where irrigation can compensate for reduced rainfall. The imperial structure collapses not from military defeat, but from the failure of the agricultural surplus that funded it. A Sumerian renaissance follows, the third dynasty of Ur, which rules from approximately 2112 to 2004 BC and produces some of the most refined administrative literature in Sumerian history, including the Code of Ur-Nammu. But the Renaissance is brief. Amorite invasions from the west and Elamite attacks from the east end it. The last Sumerian dynasty falls in 2004 BC. The Sumerian language survives as a scholarly language for another 2,000 years, but the civilization it expressed, the city-states, the temple economies, the independent political entities of southern Mesopotamia, is gone. The civilization that invented writing does not write its own ending into the historical record. What survives of Sumer is what the clay tablets preserve, and clay tablets preserve accounting records, legal contracts, literary texts, and administrative documents far better than they preserve political history or cultural memory. The Sumerians knew what was happening as their civilization ended. The lament for the destruction of Ur, a literary text from the period of the city's sack by the Elamites, is one of the most powerful pieces of grief literature in any human language. But the lament is written in a language that nobody speaks by the time modern scholars begin to read it. The civilizations that follow Sumer, Babylon, Assyria, Persia, acknowledge the Sumerian past in their religious and literary traditions. Babylonian scholars copy Sumerian literary texts and maintain knowledge of the Sumerian language for religious purposes. But the political history, the economic achievement, the specific contribution of the Sumerian city-states to the foundations of civilization is not transmitted. It is assumed as background rather than celebrated as origin. When Alexander the Great conquers Mesopotamia in 331 BC, Sumerian cuneiform is still being written by a small community of Babylonian temple scholars. Within 2 centuries of Alexander, it is gone. The last known cuneiform tablet is dated to 75 AD. The script is forgotten. The language is forgotten. The civilization is forgotten. The sites where the cities stood are covered by millennia of accumulated debris and wind-blown sediment, invisible to the travelers who pass within miles of them without knowing what lies beneath their feet. It takes until the 1840s, when British and French archaeologists begin excavating the tells of southern Iraq, for the world to discover what had been lost. The decipherment of cuneiform, completed in stages through the 1850s, opens access to a civilization that had been producing the foundations of human intellectual and commercial life for 2,000 years before the Greeks, 2,000 years before Rome, 2,000 years before any of the civilizations that Western history has treated as its origin points. The Sumerians invented writing so that an accountant could record a barley delivery. 5,000 years later, we are still using the system they created: the 60-minute hour, the 360-degree circle, the legal contract, the interest-bearing loan, the school, the city, the state. The civilization that built all of these things was erased so completely that the modern world had to excavate it from the ground. We have been living in Sumer's world for 5,000 years without knowing it was there.